Welcome to the Csec Honors Graduation for 2020. I'm Rod Ewing, a member of the teaching team that includes Professor Amy Zegart and Dr. Asfandyar Mir, both of whom you'll hear from as the program progresses. This has been quite a year. The honors cohort got off to a great start in Washington, D.C. with the Honors College, led by Ambassador Pfeiffer, Dr. Felter, and Dr. Mir. The students returned to campus, worked hard through 2 quarters of a normal academic year, and then with a swiftness unimagined, the COVID-19 pandemic struck the US, the Stanford campus was shut down, and the honors students were scattered across the US and abroad. The students kept working, a tribute to their perseverance, and the class continued in the virtual reality that we experience still today. Of course, the normal academic year was not normal. The ever-present undercurrents of racism erupted to the surface with the murder of George Floyd. Racial injustice, economic injustice, and a slow and fragmented response to the pandemic revealed the weaknesses of US institutions. These weaknesses extend well beyond domestic issues. As the US role as the world's leader has diminished, climate change, nuclear security, biosecurity, cybersecurity, and great powers jostling for position have moved the world closer to an existential precipice. During the next decades, the world will face any number of important tipping points. I do not think that any generation has ever been presented with such a variety of major challenges. Many of these challenges are coupled in such a complex way that the solutions will not be found using present theories or analytical tools. That said, what gives me hope is the quality and dedication of the next generation, and more specifically, this honors cohort. Scan the titles of the honors theses, and you'll find that every thesis topic is of vital importance. In a time when the world needs great thinkers who will care for the planet and take action, I believe that some of those next leaders are in this class. Your leadership on the issue of racism in America has already been made evident this past week by your letter to the FSI and Csec leadership. And I want to thank each of you for your initiative, your ideas, and the wisdom of your ideas. I shall not advise you on how to manage your careers and responsibilities moving forward, as each of you has to find your own way. I'll only observe that your success is essential as we all confront the challenges of today and tomorrow's world. So with those thoughts, Godspeed, and let me turn the program over to Dr. Mir.
Thank you, Dr. Ewing, for those remarks. I would now like to call on the advisors of each of the honors students. First, I would turn to Dr. Jeremy Weinstein and request him to introduce Benjamin Boston.
Thanks so much, Dr. Mir. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today, as well as the families that are celebrating your extraordinary accomplishments. It's my privilege to toast or roast Ben Boston, who I had the privilege of advising over the course of this year. Ben, it's been a privilege to be with you on this journey, and I call it a journey because I looked back in my email to see what you had originally proposed as your thesis when we first met almost a year ago. You began with an interest in the effects of British diplomacy on Kenyan land reform. And though that wasn't the thesis that you ultimately wrote, I was intrigued enough by that proposal to begin working with you. What Ben ended up producing was an examination of the effects of US diplomacy on Kenyan and Ugandan democratization, as well as external military engagements. And in tackling this project, You took on one of the most important and understudied tools in international relations, diplomacy. You developed a comparative case study design that would permit you to test important hypotheses that you generated about what might explain variation across these cases. You did some dogged work identifying the behind the scenes decision makers who had a window into what happened in the US relationship with Uganda and Kenya during these periods, sometimes more than a decade or 2 decades ago, and conducted interviews to gather information that hadn't previously been in the public domain. And you pulled it all together in an impressive analytical and empirically rich thesis. So whatever path you pursue, whether it's in public policy or academia or both, this thesis provides a really fabulous foundation for these next steps. You learned a ton, you tackled a big and complex project, and you made a meaningful contribution to knowledge. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Weinstein, for those remarks. I would now turn to Dr. Kenneth Schultz and request him to introduce Elena Crespo.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to say some words about Elena's thesis, which was really one of the most innovative undergraduate projects that I've had the privilege to supervise. So Elena's thesis was motivated by an important question about who pays the human costs of America's wars and how that affects our country's foreign policy. Since 1973, as you may know, the United States has had an all-volunteer military force, which means we entice people to join the military by offering training and good pay, rather than conscripting them through the draft. And when the shift to the AVF was proposed in the aftermath of Vietnam, its architects thought there'd be a lot of benefits, including an army and a military that was better at fighting America's wars. But there was always this concern that an AVF would isolate the military from society by reducing the set of people who served and by concentrating the costs of war by race, socioeconomic status, and geographic region. And a big concern here was that it might make it easier for political leaders to pursue adventurous foreign policies because the elites would be insulated from the costs. So Elena wanted to know if this was true. And it's a really hard question. Did a switch to the AVF make it easier to go to war? Did it reduce or insulate political leaders from the costs of war? And this is a hard question to answer because, of course, we don't get to see the same war pursued under 2 different manpower systems. So to get around this, Elena used a very clever counterfactual analysis to assess one difference between an all-volunteer force and a conscripted force, which is the geographic distribution of casualties. So we know that the AVF has concentrated casualties more in rural states and in the South than did prior conscription systems. So what would have been the political impact of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan had those wars produced the geographic distribution of casualties that was more equal? So I don't want to get into all the details of the method here, but it involved estimating the effect of casualties at the state level on the outcomes of presidential and Senate elections, then creating a counterfactual distribution of casualties, either by dividing them equally across states or by mimicking the Vietnam era distribution of casualties, and then trying to assess whether that would have affected the electoral outcomes. Would it have changed who won in a given state or the presidential or Senate elections? So Elena anticipated that by spreading casualties out more evenly, the conscripted force exposes more communities to the losses of war and therefore would impose greater costs on the president and his party. But what she actually found was different from that. The results were rather complicated and didn't always point in that direction. And there was an interesting lesson here that while changing the distribution of costs does affect the electoral does it affect some votes in some places, the issue in the American political system is that very few states have competitive elections, either at the Senate or presidential level. So the shifts aren't big enough to affect many states. And so the outcome was not entirely predictable. And so the big lesson here was that the issue for accountability for the costs of war is very much affected by the lack of competitiveness in America's elections. This thesis really stood out as innovative. Elena did a very impressive job, and it was great working with her. She really climbed up the learning curve of skills needed to pull it off, and it was great to watch her deal with the fact that the results were not what she anticipated, which is always a challenge for a researcher, but the best learning opportunities. Elena, it was absolutely wonderful working with you. Congratulations on your accomplishments, and congratulations to your family as well on this wonderful day.
Thanks so much, Professor Schultz.
Thank you, Professor Schultz, for those remarks. We now turn to our next student, and our next student had 2 advisors, not 1. I would request Ambassador Stephen Pfeiffer and then Dr. Rod Ewing to introduce Kelly Devitz.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, Professor Muir. But actually, let me first congratulate the entire group of CSAC honor students. I had the chance to meet you all during Honors College in Washington, D.C. in September, which now seems like it was years and years ago. But before going to Washington, I was given a list of cautions, things to watch out for, things that Stanford students might do in Washington that they should not do. And I have to say, during my time there, you didn't cross a single one of those lines. It was a great group, great interactions. When I got back, I had messages from the State Department, from the British Embassy, from institutions like Brookings and the Hudson Institute, talking about how impressed they were with the caliber of your discussion, the caliber of your questions, and you were a great reflection both on yourselves and also on Stanford University. So I had the privilege of advising Kelly on her thesis, which looked at the question, why did the Russians decide to build the 9M729 ground-launched cruise missile, an intermediate-range missile that in fact was banned by the 1987 Treaty on Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces? The United States and Russia were prohibited from testing or developing such missiles. And she did an outstanding job on this. There's been a lot written on the INF Treaty the last couple of years, particularly as it became apparent that the Trump administration was moving towards withdrawal from the treaty because of the Russian violation. And Kelly's thesis really asked a question that very few people asked. In fact, I haven't seen it anywhere else. And the question was, what were the factors that drove the Russian decision? Why did the Russians decide to build this missile when it put at risk the treaty that at least at some point the Russian government had decided was in Russia's interest? And I think one reason why there's so little written on this is because it was a very challenging topic to explore. First of all, Kelly had no access to classified material. Second, she had no access to the Russian decision makers. But she overcame those challenges. And her thesis did a great job, first of all, using the literature review and interviews with former American and Russian officials and other experts on both sides of the Atlantic to lay out the timeline, the history, and to develop 4 hypotheses to explain Russian motivations. And I think in the end, she correctly concluded that these were driven really by traditional military concerns, both about the traditional military threat that the Russians saw from NATO and emerging threats such as China. And that conclusion really, I think, synthesized and presented a very clear and logical and compelling picture for why the Russians did what they did. So it was a great job. It was a great thesis. It was great analysis. And I really enjoyed working with you on this, Kelly. And just one last point, as you head off in September to Seattle to join Microsoft, please remember that there are other jobs where you can write analyses like this all the time, and you'll get access to classified material and maybe even to the decision makers.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Pfeiffer. It was great working with you.
All right.
Professor Ewing?
Yes, as the second advisor, I think Ambassador Pfeiffer has covered the first part of what would have been my comments. So let me skip to the end of my comments and make a few observations. And these observations have to do with the question, what was it like to work with Kelly? Well, she's an engineer's engineer, bright, organized, efficient, and quantitative in her perspective as she approaches every issue. The difficulty that Kelly faced, however, is that actually her thesis is essentially a political science thesis. Very different intellectual framework for attacking issues and problems. Very different from a typical engineering project. To Kelly's credit, she watched, she listened, and she learned, and at the end had created a truly first-class thesis. Kelly, it's been a privilege to have you, an engineer, as a member of this year's honors cohort. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Pfeiffer and Dr. Ewing. We now turn to our next student who was also advised by two advisors, Dr. Megan Palmer and David Relman, and I would request them to introduce to us Adam Elliott.
Great, can you hear me? Wonderful. So first of all, I want to congratulate all the graduates as well. This has been an incredibly challenging period of time, and it's great to see all of you embracing these challenges in great stride. I've had the great honor to advise Adam, although I feel like sometimes Adam is advising me on many topics, and I think that's an indication of a great relationship between an advisor and a mentee. I actually met Adam back in 2018 in a lecture in his bioengineering 44 class, and he is one of several students that piped up, and it was immediately apparent that he was interested in topics in policy. And only a few months later, after getting some advice on what to do with Stanford and Washington, I saw him facilitating a meeting on challenging issues in biosecurity with former Secretary Moniz and Secretary Carter. And so you knew right away that Adam was going to be looking at challenging topics in this space, and it was an easy yes to work with him as a research assistant and then later on as a thesis advisor. And what I really enjoyed in working with Adam is he took many of the topics that he encountered both through the fellowship with NTI that brought him to that meeting and later on at the World Health Organization, and took those as inspiration for his thesis to look at really a contemporary topic in how do we manage potentially risky work in the life sciences, so-called dual-use research of concern. And like Rod Ewing said, the topics that demanded a different type of research framework than was necessarily provided in his engineering background. And so that was one of the things that was great to see, and I thank many of the other advisors in the Csec honors program for providing Adam with that type of environment to leverage tools in political science and other fields to answer a set of questions about not only how do we characterize these risk management approaches, but how do we look for the rationales behind them. And so Adam took a thesis where he took two contemporary case studies in so-called dual-use research concern in gene drives, as well as in potential pandemic pathogen research, followed these case studies in the responses that the two different government agencies, the NIH and DARPA, took, and then began to unpack the different reasons behind them and came up with a really great framework to look at differences in approaches, not saying that one was better than the other, but one was more entrepreneurial, technology focused, and one was more upstream oversight and policy focused, and examine the merits of each. So Adam, I think you've done a great contribution here. I also think it's very admirable the way you took feedback, very difficult feedback, and integrated it back into your work. And I am extremely excited for your future career combining these. You're really set up for success.
Thank you, Megan.
I will add just a few comments. I'm in many ways in a similar situation as Rod was just previously. Many good words and much of what needs to be said has certainly already been said. I too want to just express my gratitude and thanks to Adam for opening my eyes to sides of difficult problems that might not otherwise have been so clearly revealed. It's always a privilege and an honor to work with any of the great students at Csec, and Adam is absolutely a wonderful example of that. The problem that he took on is especially difficult and especially relevant today with the current problems that we all see right in front of us. It was also difficult because of the sparsity of available data and the lack of an obvious good method for controlling for lots of confounding factors and comparing essentially apples and oranges. But in the face of all of that, Adam displayed creativity, determination, insight, and then emerged with I think, a very compelling and important conclusion. I will just conclude by adding on a personal note that Adam teaches us in his thesis about more than bureaucratic institutions and approaches to risky science. He also illustrates the importance of humility, thoughtfulness, and perseverance in tackling tough problems into adversity. Adam, congratulations.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Drs. Palmer and Relman. Our next student is currently across the Atlantic and was also advised by two advisors. I would request Andrew Grotto and Dr. Amy Zegart to introduce Samantha Peter.
Great. Well, thanks, Dr. Meir. Sam, it is wonderful to see you, albeit through the magic of Zoom, and it's also wonderful to see your parents. Congratulations to all of you. I just, briefly echo what Dr. Ewing said at the top. I couldn't be prouder of the resolve and the resilience that all of you have shown through just an extraordinarily difficult time, compounded by the fact that we didn't change our expectations of you to produce a high quality, professional, impactful thesis. And I couldn't be more excited about the results that I've seen. So I first got to know Sam when she was a sophomore in the law school class I taught on legal and technical aspects of cybersecurity. She was undeclared at the time, and I could already tell that she was one of those students who you could see the gears turning in her mind during the lecture and discussions. And throughout the class, she was inquisitive, creative, and fearless. Never shied away from asking hard questions, challenging questions. And I just thought, wow, this is a person who I hope embraces this topic, and I have a chance to reconnect with as she moves through her undergraduate career. So it's been a joy to watch her embrace this topic of cybersecurity. Her thesis was on why states choose proxies, third-party non-governmental actors to carry out cyber operations. It is one of the most challenging topics in cyber policy. There are very few studies on this topic because it is hard. And I have a huge amount of admiration and respect for Sam, again, being fearless in her willingness to tackle such a hard problem and to actually succeed in producing a thesis that that I learned a lot from, and that I really think will contribute to, certainly contributed to my understanding of cyber proxies and cyber policy more broadly. She encountered speed bumps along the way, due in particular to really significant challenges associated with data collection. States typically hide their proxy relationships, or at least they don't advertise them. And that just makes this topic especially hard. Sam navigated these speed bumps with skill and maturity. She let the evidence drive her analysis and displayed what I think is a really impressive level of intellectual discipline by calibrating her findings and conclusions to the evidence. The result is a thesis that I think will endure, and she should be incredibly proud. I'm very proud of it, and I'm really excited to stay in touch with Sam as she continues her professional journey here and beyond. Over to Amy.
Thank you, Professor Grotto. So some of you may know this is a very special honors cohort because some of them actually I got to meet when they were freshmen taking PS 114S. And Samantha is one of them. And I just have to share that when they were ruling the world in our simulation, I was struck by this woman who had an incredibly authentic sounding English accent. And it turns out we had randomly assigned her to a leadership role of the British delegation. So that's how I first met Samantha. And it's been a delight, Sam, to watch you grow from that freshman year experience all the way through to the honors thesis. I want to just build on what Professor Grotto said. The degree of difficulty of this dive to do this thesis is incredibly high. Samantha examines cyber proxies with 4 different states, the big 4 cyber bad actors in the world: Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Any one of those states would pose challenges to looking at cyber proxies, and she took on all 4 of them. And her key insight is that nobody just delegates authority, right? You don't do it if you don't have to. You use a proxy only for certain reasons. There have to be incentives because proxies have incentives and opportunities to do their own thing. Now, parents, since you're sitting with your children, you'll know that you experience proxy relationships and Sam's principal agent problems that she examined every day. When you ask your kids to clean up perhaps after dinner, you know that the agent, the proxy, may not do the job as you want them to do. They may not do it as you intend them to do. So this question about why do we use proxies and what happens when you use proxies is actually really important, not just for cybersecurity, but for daily life. So what Samantha did was very clever. She looked at proxy relationships in the physical world, state-sponsored use of terrorism, for example, to try to understand what drives states to use these proxy relationships. And then she transposes that to cyberspace. And what she finds actually is that what works in the physical world, which is essentially plausible deniability, that states use proxies to try to hide their involvement, is not at all what's going on in cyberspace. And so what she finds is actually that China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea probably use proxies because they cost less than doing it yourself in government, and because they may offer specialized skills. This is a terrific thesis. As Professor Grotto alluded to, there were lots of data speed bumps along the way. And Samantha, you handled them with great resilience, with determined perseverance, and with sunshine every week when we met. It was really remarkable to see how you kept going with a smile on your face, encountering some of the most difficulties in data collection that I've seen in a thesis. And just to give you all some sense of how hard this is, even the phrase offensive cyber operations, the phrase itself was classified in the United States until the mid-2000s. So creative sleuthing, sunny perseverance, incredibly impressive result. Sam, it's been a delight to work with you over these past 4 years, and it's wonderful to see this progression to your honors thesis. Congratulations.
Thank you, Professor Zegart.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Dr. Zegart. We now turn to our next student, and I'd like to request Dr. Megan Palmer and Dr. Tim Stearns to introduce Eva Franco.
Wonderful. It's a real joy to be able to introduce 2 students in one of the Csec honors classes. So it again has been an incredible honor to work with Eva this year. She's really just an exceptional woman, and I have been able to know her since 2018, I believe, the same class where I met Adam, giving an introduction in bioengineering to topics in security. And in these classes, I often bring up news stories that usually I assume students have not heard about in biosecurity. And I remember Eva knew almost all of them. And she knew the answers, she knew the stories, and she had very compelling questions right from her sophomore year. And so I was lucky to work with her as a research assistant later on, after she'd worked a summer with a genetic engineering competition to look at topics around how we compel good behavior in bioengineering, responsible innovation. But she came to me at the end of that year and said, you know, I'm really compelled with questions around folks that might not be interested in good behavior. And so she said, I want to do a thesis on insider threats and mass casualty events. And so I remember coming to her and saying, these are challenging topics to look at, especially if you're trying to address an event that hasn't occurred. And much like Eva, she was ready for it. And she said, this is what I want to study. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to find the right advisors. I'm going to take it on this year. And so it was great to see her do that. What Eva ended up with is looking at a topic where she broke down why haven't we seen these types of mass casualty insider threats, looking at issues of motivation as well as issues of capabilities. This took her through a wide set of literature in terrorism studies, in biosecurity, and a long history of biosecurity, as well as dipping toes into innovation studies, bringing a whole new type of tool set to bear in how we study not just historical capabilities, but the trajectory of capabilities. At what point do we need to be concerned, and where might this field be going? And that allowed her to take a really innovative approach to a topic that is ultimately about hypothesizing why something hasn't happened, one of the most challenging things to pursue. I'm really excited for Eva to go on in the next stages of her career. I looked over her first email to me that said, I'm interested in the intersection between bioengineering and policy. I'm planning on following a fairly non-traditional career path. And she's going on next year for a 2-year fellowship with the Institute for Defense Analysis in their Science Technology Policy Fellowships. And I know she's just going to be excellent in that path. So thank you so much, Eva, for letting me work with you this year.
Thank you so much for your guidance and advice, Megan. I really appreciated all of it. You've been an amazing advisor.
Thanks, Megan and Eva. I get to follow up to say a little bit more about Eva and my experience working with her this year. First, congratulations on your fabulous thesis. It's been a true joy working with you. Megan did such a great job of introducing Eva and also the topic that she wrote her thesis on, which is thinking about insider threat and mass casualty events. And I have, in all the conversations I've had with Eva, I've come to realize that she really knows the history of bioterrorism and biowarfare in more detail than almost any faculty member I know at Stanford and many people in the government as well. One of the remarkable things about this is that she really had to change the way she was thinking as COVID-19 happened, not because of the disruption in the way we work and the way we communicate with each other, as all of us have, but also because one of the things that was proposed, almost certainly not true for COVID-19, is that it was released from a Chinese lab, either intentionally or accidentally. And so one of the things that she had to do was to really think about what we knew in the COVID-19 case and in the Chinese biolabs that were in question. And was it possible that this was an insider event as well? She also did a fabulous job of coming to grips with the questions about virus versus bacteria with respect to the kind of things that people think about in bioterrorism events. And I was deeply impressed. Eva, congratulations and good luck. I look forward to helping you in whatever you choose to do in the future.
Thank you, Professor Stearns. You've been absolutely invaluable. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Doctors Palmer and Stearns for your remarks. Now turn to our next student, who was also advised by 2 advisors, Doctors Scott Sagan and Condoleezza Rice. I would now request Dr. Scott Sagan to introduce Jonah Martin Glick Unterman.
Well, it's been a great pleasure working with Jonah since his freshman year, where he served as a research assistant for me in the summer, to now the final stage of finishing a thesis. My comments come from both Condi Rice and from my heart, and you can tell that I'm speaking for both of us because I'll use a sports analogy. There is in baseball something called a 5-tool player, someone who hits for average, hits for power, fields well, throws well, and has the speed to run the bases skillfully. Jonah is a 5-tool scholar. He wrote a extensively thorough literature review, so thorough that I sometimes had to say, you really don't need to discuss that minor article or this minor article. stick to the big ones, and he did that superbly. He created a data set that showed his data science skills. Most work on coercion that would study what are the factors that involved in success or failures, looked at individual cases. And he said, well, no, you should actually look at individual threats, and used the data sets from the New York Times and the American President's Project to come up with a very extensive new data set of US verbal and physical threats, military mobilizations. He displayed strong quantitative skills, using advanced statistical methods, running regressions to see how the factors that other scholars had said influenced success or failure in coercion, did they or did they not? And found out that very rarely was there a strong relationship between what other people had thought were factors for success when you looked at this larger data set. For example, naval and army mobilizations as threats rarely led to success, and only Air Force mobilizations had a statistically significant relationship with success. Jonah also, fourth, displayed qualitative skills in his case studies, not just running a regression, but saying, do those factors that I identified really help us understand, and did a superb job looking at both the 1991 buildup to the first Gulf War threats that were given and the 2003 Gulf War. And fifth and finally, I think he displayed a quite remarkable creative spark. When he saw, for example, that ultimatum rarely had the impact that most scholars thought they did, he came up with a hypothesis. For the non-scholars, that's a theoretically informed hunch, a sense that maybe someone gives an ultimatum not only when they want someone to cave in, but after they've decided to actually go to war, to try to signal not the adversary, but rather allies or domestic audiences, or their own sense that you should not go to war without giving a last resort, even though you don't think it's going to work. It was quite a remarkable thesis. So Jonah, it's been a great joy working with you. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's been an awesome journey.
Thank you, Dr. Sagan, for those remarks. Now turn to our next student, who was advised by Doctors Anna Grismala-Abus and Dr. Joseph Felter. I would request them to introduce Andrew Lokay.
Hi, everyone. First of all, let me echo the other congratulations to all the graduates. You've done a fantastic job, and it's amazing that you've done it under these very trying circumstances. So it's my pleasure to talk a bit about Andrew's thesis, which asks this really critical question. Why would countries repatriate former ISIS fighters? And it turns out, and this I learned from Andrew, that there's enormous variation here. Some countries don't repatriate them at all and refuse to take back their fighters. Others happily take them back. And so Andrew, in a really meticulous way, examines 4 different hypotheses, 4 different explanations for this. It might have something to do with NATO aspirations. It might have something to do with former jihadist attacks on that territory, anti-Muslim sentiment, or even the quality of law that these countries have. And his answer is really, really interesting, because what he basically does through both case studies and through a sort of broader analysis is to show us that, on the one hand, countries that want to join NATO are far more likely to repatriate their former fighters in an attempt to basically make good with the United States. But countries that have high evidentiary standards, such as Britain, for example, are much less likely to accept their former ISIS fighters. And it's been a lot of fun working with Andrew on this thesis. He is a meticulous scholar. He basically would leave no stone unturned. He is very mature in his thinking. He's very thoughtful, innovative, and sophisticated. And by this point, he's become sort of a maven on this topic. He certainly knows about it far more than anybody else I know. So congratulations, Andrew, and congratulations to your family.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure and an honor to work with you this year.
Joe, I think you're mute.
3 months of this and I still mute myself. But Andrew, it's great to see you. Congratulations to you. Congratulations to your family. I had a chance to meet your dad when we were in the Pentagon. But first of all, just thanks for the chance to be involved in this amazing program, which is Csec Honors. And really want to thank Amy and Rod and Svindar and so many others for your leadership and mentorship. I first met Andrew back in September, where I had the privilege to join Ambassador Steve Pfeiffer and Svindar at Honors College. And I'd be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to thank Ambassador Carl Eikenberry for his extraordinary work and contributions to making that such a success. But I was literally less than 24 hours since I had officially resigned or left the Defense Department. And there was just no better way to just remind of just how special Stanford is and Stanford students are than to go to Honors College and just meet these extraordinary young men and women who give us so much hope for the future. Anna did a fantastic job of describing Andrew's research. So I won't redo this, although I too just echo her compliments on just what an extraordinary scholar Andrew is and how dedicated he was throughout. So let me just jump to a few highlights about Andrew and what struck me as really important about his research. But Andrew, I think you overcame the challenge that so many, all of us that have done research do, where you've got the hypothesis and explanations that you want, and then you've got the data and information that you can test those hypotheses. So it's trying to make that overlap there. And you're just disciplined and tireless in your efforts to come up with amazing hypotheses and explanations for this very important question. And then just make a very pragmatic effort to find, leave no stone unturned as far as what data you can bring to the table. So just unwavering as you work through developing this original data set and getting the information qualitative and quantitative to test your hypothesis. So let me jump down. Again, I had a great description of the importance of the research. But certainly your research has really important implications for counterterrorism policy. We see risk of attacks coming from some of these foreign terrorist fighters. It's really a complex issue with no easy answer. But for me, I really thought it also spoke to a broader challenge, and that's the importance of multilateral security institutions. When one of your key findings was that a country's interest in becoming a NATO aspirant and pleasing the United States as a leader of that multilateral security institution, what struck me that this is just another example of the importance of these security institutions and really of the importance for the U.S. to continue to play a leadership role, to be that leader that states aspire to want to please and work with. And I think in these times, this is a great reminder that your research provided us of that importance. But Andrew, they say, life's not a marathon, not a sprint, but you just sprinted the whole year. As Anna said, your discipline, determination was really impressive. You sought expertise out from so many, and thanks to all of you, Brett McGurk and many others that provided Andrew so much of your time and insights. But again, Andrew, you were just not intimidated by anything. I would kind of keep up in the game on how early we could meet sometimes, and you were always there waiting for me at the coffee lounge outside of Hoover with a ton of questions and eager to get to work. So thank you. I would say if there's any room for optimism during these particularly challenging times, I think it's known that we have just extraordinary young people like Andrew and all of his classmates at Honors College, just willing to apply themselves to help address the challenges that affect all of us. So congratulations, Andrew, to your family, to all the students today. Just wonderful to get to know you, privileged. Look forward to seeing Andrew and all of you as you move out into the world and help address those important problems that matter to all of this. So thank you, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Felter. It's been a privilege to work with you from Honors College through the end of the thesis, so thank you.
Thank you, Dr. GB and Dr. Felter for those remarks. Now turn to our next student who was advised by Dr. Colin Call. I would request Dr. Call to introduce Brian Metzger.
Thanks, Asfandiar, and hello, everybody. I would say good morning. It's good morning here. It's all different time zones where you are. For those of you who haven't had a chance to meet before, especially the parents, I'm Colin Call. I'm the social science co-director. I'm kind of the Robin to Rod Ewing's Batman in the Csec leadership team. And in my capacity as co-director, I just want to congratulate all of you, not just Brian, I'll get to Brian in a minute, but all of you on making it through Stanford under extraordinarily challenging times at the end there, but it's a real achievement. And so congratulations on finishing your honors thesis and graduating. And I will just say, nothing says you finally made it, you're an adult now, like being forced to move back with your parents during a pandemic. So, you know, this too will pass, but congratulations to you, seriously. Brian. Brian Metzger is an awesome guy who picked a very, very interesting topic. Essentially, Brian wanted to explore the role of foreign influence on American foreign policy decisions, which sounds like it should be kind of a pretty simple, straightforward question. It's an issue that's become increasingly important in recent years, especially as it relates to American adversaries. So think about groups like the Islamic State, which used online influence and propaganda campaigns to recruit and inspire, recruit foreign fighters to come to Iraq and Syria and Libya and other places, or inspire attacks in Western countries. Or think about Russia's adversarial influence campaign in the context of the 2016 elections, or more recent accusations of Chinese information operations in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. But like most of the topics that our honor students pursue, this one proved to be much more complicated than it would first appear. For one thing, it's not just our adversaries that engage in these influence operations, it is also our allies and our partners who do it. And for another thing, there's more than one form of influence. And one of the innovative theoretical things that Brian's thesis did was to disaggregate forms of influence. And while I don't know if Brian considers himself a political scientist or not, he nevertheless generated a 2x2 table. So you are officially a political scientist now for the rest of your life because you have a 2x2 table of foreign influence, where on one axis, you drew the distinction between lobbying and more diffuse influence operations aimed at shaping public opinion in the information space. So there's that, those are along one axis is that continuum. And then on the other is whether the activities are done directly by a foreign country or they're done indirectly, often through domestic or civil society groups that are aligned with that country's interests. And so you generated a 2x2 table, congratulations. But it was a theoretical insight that was extraordinarily valuable. You then had to figure out how to test this thing. And you picked a great empirical laboratory for doing that. It's proof that actually you can get a lot of mileage even out of a single case study if you disaggregate the case. And so what Brian looked at was the role of foreign influence in shaping US decisions over the Iran nuclear deal. And the way that Brian generated interesting variation was to look across time. So you could look at two very different US administrations, the Obama administration and the Trump administration, that have approached this issue in very different ways. And then across those two administrations to look at three different actors that are very different types. So one actor was Israel, a democratic country, a US ally. A second actor is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, a US strategic partner, but an authoritarian country with values in many respects very much at odds with the United States. And then the third was Iran itself, an adversarial country that nevertheless, their preferences on engagement overlapped with some of the preferences of some US domestic actors, especially non-proliferation and anti-war groups in the United States. So that, even though it was a single case, the way that Brian approached it allowed him to get a lot of leverage in exploring these different pathways of influence and how effective they are. It was a hard thing to research. Believe it or not, when you call up a foreign ambassador or others, they don't admit to influencing US decisions very often. But Brian, whether or not you consider yourself a political scientist, I know that at your heart of hearts, you're a budding investigative journalist, and you used the best methods of an investigative journalist to try to dig at and uncover the truth. You used existing reporting on this issue. You dug up interesting financial records and other documents to show various pathways of influence. And most especially, you conducted scores of in-depth interviews with foreign officials and with US officials on Capitol Hill, in the Obama administration, in the Trump administration, and also in the kind of think tank and broader expert community. And through all of that, you managed to put together, I think, a compelling narrative on a very interesting topic. So Brian, congratulations. Great job. I expect great things in the future from you, and I hope that you will keep us all appraised of your journey moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor Call. It was a pleasure working with you. Thank you, Dr. Call, for those remarks. Now turn to our next student, who was advised by Dr. Amy Zegart. I'd request Dr. Zegart to introduce to us Antigone Xenopoulos.
Thanks, Dr. Muir. I have the pleasure of talking about Antigone Xenopoulos' thesis. Like Sam, Antigone took PS 114 as a freshman. I can picture where she sat in the class. She was always ready to ask sharp questions of everybody who came to present in that class. And I've gotten to have her as a research assistant, which has been a wonderful journey over these past 4 years. So we all know that great power rivalry is back, but Antigone saw this coming long before many people in Washington did. She's been interested in rivalry with China for quite some time, and her thesis really examines an underlooked, underappreciated aspect of that great power rivalry, which is America's growing dependence on China and Chinese supply chains for dual-use products. So products that have widespread commercial use and products that have widespread military use as well. So the first part of her thesis actually examines what happened. How widespread is this dual-use dependence? When did it develop? How serious is it? How concerned should we be? She meticulously tracks growing dependence on Chinese supply chains for 4 key dual-use products: printed circuit boards, lithium-ion batteries, rare earth minerals, and pharmaceuticals, long before pharmaceuticals made the headlines about COVID-19. These dual-use products are essential for everything from our cell phones, our computers, electric cars, to fighter jets, military sensors, and satellites. But Antigone, that's just half of Antigone's thesis. The next part of her thesis and the heart of what she does is to examine why this dependence developed. What explains the patterns that we see? And that's where she marshals a sophisticated use of a range of theory and an incredible data collection effort. She develops 3 key hypotheses. First, it could be that leaders were unaware of the rising threat of China, and in particular dual-use dependence. Maybe it is an individual threat perception problem. The second hypothesis is, well, maybe it's a problem of bureaucracy. Maybe leaders did see the threat, but our organizations in the federal government were poorly designed to bring economic policy and security policy together. Or third, maybe it's a domestic politics story. Maybe it's about lobbying by industries to try to search for better margin by offshoring to China. 3 very different types of explanations that required a tremendous data collection effort to try to sort through what's going on. And Antigone rose to the challenge, and it was a challenge. Just to give you some idea of how exhaustive and impressive this data collection effort was, she looked at every relevant government report over the past 20 years. She conducted content analysis of hundreds of cabinet speeches. She analyzed organizational dynamics of the White House and 4 different cabinet departments over 4 presidential administrations. And then she developed case studies about other dual-use national security related topics. And she conducted interviews with former national security officials. She finds compelling evidence that US leaders were slow to see the potential of dual-use dependence from a rising China, and that economic and security policy were formulated for far too long in silos in government that prevented coherent policy development. Antigone's thesis makes an original and sophisticated and important contribution to a critical policy issue. Now, Antigone, you don't even know this because I didn't reveal it even yesterday, but your thesis is already making the rounds in defense and policy circles. And one senior defense private sector leader said to me that he thinks it's the best analysis he's seen on the topic. So it's a great example of how honor students at Csec, it's never too soon to make an impact on policy. And I'm really excited about what you're going to do in the future. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Professor Zegart. It's really been a pleasure to work with you over the last 4 years, and you've been an invaluable part of my experience at Stanford. So thank you for everything.
Thank you, Dr. Zegart, for those remarks. We now turn to our final student, last but not the least, most certainly, who was advised by Dr. Gilly Wardy and Dr. H.R. McMaster. I would request them to introduce Sophia Boyer.
Who would you like to go first?
Go ahead. You go first, Gilly. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to introduce Sophia and to say a little about her work. I've met Sophia years ago in Introduction to Military History, and she also took 3 other courses on military history. I think it suggests to you that she's interested in some hardcore, right, the bread and butter of military conflict. And when Sophia approached me with the idea of a Csec honors thesis, I don't think she ever asked me to be a co-advisor. I think I asked her to be her co-advisor. So in Sophia's thesis examined the multiple strategic motivations and necessary conditions for a transformation in the strategy of one of the least transparent armed forces in the world, the Pakistan Armed Forces. She examined and explained root causes and agents of change in Pakistan's military strategy, and she also identified the nuanced effect of their interlocking relations. Sophia came up with her own definition of 4 different eras of discrete eras of strategic concepts. And you would assume, right, that if you just look at security budget, right, it will sort of reveal itself to you, tell you what a country is all about. Well, this was not the case, and Sophia had to work very hard in order to understand where change is coming from and exactly how money is being spent. I can't tell you a whole lot about how she did it, because it involved also a highly classified military document. So I'm sorry, we'll just keep it to ourselves. In her work, Sophia managed to decode the underlying strategic logic of Pakistan's strategy, and by doing so, she gave us a key to better understand a central actor in South Asia and shift our policy accordingly. And Sophia did all this with rigor, with commitment, with skill, and tremendous grace under fire. I couldn't be more proud of her or more thankful for the opportunity to be her co-advisor.
Thank you so much, Professor Vardy.
Hey, Sophia, what a pleasure it was to work with you over the past year and a half. You did just a tremendous job on your thesis, as Gilly mentioned. I mean, I think what we tend to neglect oftentimes is what drives and constrains the other. We don't have what we worked on, Sophia, in the context of this book project over the last year and a half, is we don't have sufficient strategic empathy, and we don't view problem sets from the perspective of the other enough, and pay attention to the emotions, the aspirations that drive and constrain the other. And you did it brilliantly, I think. I'm a historian, and I don't even know what a regression is, but I understood the argument in your thesis. I think you did a tremendous job. I mean, it is political history. It's good political. It's good political science. But it's military history. It's intellectual history. It's diplomatic history. You did a wonderful job, and I think that you're going to serve as an analyst. You're going to be an analyst. I think you're going to be brilliant. I know you will be, and you're going to exceed everyone's expectations and make tremendous contributions to our society. And for all the graduates, I'd just like to say, you restore our faith, I think, in America. We're going through a very difficult time. We have twin crises, at least, going on right now, and it's certainly trying times, But when I look at you, and I've gotten to know a few of you in this class over the last year and a half, I have tremendous confidence in our future. So I would just want to say congratulations to all the graduates, and to Sophia, thank you for a wonderful thesis, and thank you for helping me complete this book, which is now sitting in warehouses. But I'm going to get you a copy very, very soon. And you're a wonderful researcher, a great scholar, student, great person. And so to Sophia's family, hey, you did a great job also. Congratulations to you as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, General McMaster.
Thanks so much, Drs. Vardy and McMaster. With that, we have now been introduced to all the students in the program. I just want to conclude this section of the ceremony with a comment of my own. I think I've had the best job this past year I could have asked for, because I had the privilege to work with all 11 of you, learn from you, be inspired by you. So thank you for your important and probing questions, both your research questions and the challenging questions you asked me in office hours. You know, and I think it's your willingness to push yourself consistently is so inspirational since Washington, when we first all met. I think we have become friends, so thank you for your friendship. And just finally, I am so proud of all of you. With that, on to you, Dr. Zegart, for a very important award ceremony.
Thank you, Dr. Meir. HR, I think you said it so well, that these students really restore our faith in America and the world and what the next generation can do, often to teach this generation. So I'm so proud of all of you. It's a difficult time, as Dr. Ewing mentioned at the outset, and many of you have noted, but it's also a time today for joy, for laughter, and for celebration. And I am so honored to be able to present some awards to this year's class. Now, parents, I'm sure, and students know that I have a graduating senior in this year's class at Stanford too. And if you're like me, you know that you might have been a little worried at the start of the year that your graduating senior might never come home again. And now you might be worried that your graduating senior might never leave home again. But rest assured they will, and they have been doing some amazing things while they've been here at Stanford, and even on those bizarre Zoom calls that you might have seen from time to time. So let me get to the awards for this year's honors class. And let me just say that the awards were determined by an award committee that included the teaching team, so Dr. Ewing, Dr. Meir, and myself, as well as professors Martha Crenshaw and Chip Blacker, two people who have been instrumental in running this honors program, and we're so lucky to have inherited this wonderful honors program from them and to have them be involved still in serving on the awards committee. So thanks to Professors Blacker and Crenshaw. The first award I want to present is the Firestone Medal, which is a Stanford University-wide award presented to the top 10% of all undergraduate theses in the sciences, in the social sciences, and in engineering. This year's Firestone Medal goes to Jonah Unterman for his thesis entitled The Cost Capitulation Paradox, Compellant Signals, Sequences, and Selection Effects, advised by Professor Scott Sagan and Professor Condi Rice. Congratulations to you, Jonah.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored by this.
Our next award is the Peary Prize, named after Csec's own Bill Peary, who, as you know, served as Secretary of Defense, has been a longtime professor at Stanford, and was co-director of Csec. And the Peary Prize recognizes excellence in policy-relevant research in international security studies. The 2020 Peary Prize goes to Antigone Xenopoulos for her thesis titled Ties That Bind, U.S. Dual-Use Dependence on China, advised by a very lucky woman, me. So congratulations, Antigone, on that.
Thank you very much for this honor. I'm really flattered.
Third, we have the John Holland Slusser World Peace Prize, which is awarded to the thesis that best demonstrates excellence in the analysis of one or more steps toward world peace. This year's Slusser Prize goes to Kelly Devens for her thesis entitled Missile Motivations, Assessing Russian Noncompliance with the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, advised by Professor Rod Ewing and Ambassador Stephen Pfeiffer. Congratulations to you, Kelly.
Thank you so much. This is such a large honor.
Now, as you all know, normally we only have 3 awards for undergraduate honors theses, but this is a very special year. And so we have received special dispensation from the highest levels of the university to present to you some additional awards. Now, for liability reasons, I need to underscore that Professors Crenshaw and Blacker played no part whatsoever in the awards that we are about to give. So keep them out of this. The instructional team served as the awards committee. We also have to thank the creative graphics talents of Emily Silva, who will be my co-pilot as we go through these special awards. So thank you to Emily, not only for that, but for making this entire award ceremony possible. Let me just say, I think it's fair to say that nobody will ever win these particular awards again, Csec students of 2020. So let's start with our first award, which goes to a thesis that is literally revolutionary. This student had everybody convinced that he was deeply interested in British diplomacy toward former colonies in Africa. He said he had studied in the UK, he was going to study there after graduation, and his thesis was all about British diplomacy. Until one day he showed up in seminar, and his thesis recap didn't even mention the United Kingdom at all. So the committee has now determined that it was all a clever deception operation to break once and for all with the British Empire, beginning with his name, Ben Boston. We have now figured out that Ben used Microsoft Word's find and replace at every page in his thesis where it said UK, and he replaced it with US, completely erasing the United Kingdom from any part of history in his thesis. He even managed to fool his thesis advisor, Professor Jeremy Weinstein. And Jeremy, you really should have known better, given that, of course, Jeremy served as deputy to the US ambassador to the United Nations. So on behalf of the committee, we say to Ben, well played, sir, well played. Emily, if we can go, there we go. We are delighted to present Ben Boston the British Empire Award for ditching the United Kingdom faster than any previous honors student. So congratulations, Ben. Now, many Csec honors students go on to have very successful careers in the policy world, and this student looks like she's destined for that path as well. She studied bioengineering, but now she's become actually quite an accomplished criminologist and behavioral profiler who has spent a very lonely year examining lonely insider threats in biolabs and the risks that they pose. Now, in the movies, nobody does this job better than Jodie Foster's character in Silence of the Lambs. And so, Eva Frankel, we are delighted to present you with the inaugural, and we think only ever, Csec Silence of the Lambs Award for being the most likely FBI profiler of lonely insiders. Congratulations to Eva. Now, our next award goes to a student who managed to juggle her honors thesis with job interviews that took her all over the country. And she landed her dream job before anybody else in the cohort. Now, her classmates, this is a wonderful group of peers, and they were thrilled for her when she told them that she had gotten this dream job. But they were also completely freaked out when they heard the news. And so we had to hold a special class to de-freak out the honors cohort that yes, there is life after Stanford and Csec honors, and they will all land interesting, wonderful jobs and be off on their careers. That de-freak out session became so valuable, we now intend to do it every year. And so the freaking out the cohort goes to Kelly Devins for landing her dream job before anyone else. And you can see Emily Silva's creative graphics work on display in this particular award. Our next award. We know that great power competition is back, and while there's bipartisan consensus on this now, this student was far ahead of her time, seeing fault lines and the urgent need for action long before others did. And perhaps more important, she was unafraid to challenge old ideas and conventional wisdom about what needed to be done. The creatively designed John Bolton Award goes to Antigone Xenopoulos for being most likely to disrupt Sino-American relations, and a very creative use of facial hair by Emily Silva on that one. Congratulations, Antigone. Now, Csec honors presentations typically include a few friends and one or two faculty advisors. When they're in person, they tend to be small affairs. And that's true even when we've had to move to Zoom online for the spring quarter. They're more of a family affair. But one student took this presentation to an entirely new level. He invited every person on the Stanford faculty who had ever served in any administration in any capacity in foreign policy before. And in a testament to this student, they all came. And so, Jonah, we are pleased to present you the Dancing with the Stars Award for bringing the most former cabinet members to a thesis presentation. And we'll just dwell on this graphic for a moment. For those who can't see it particularly well, I'm especially fond of H.R. McMaster's role in this Dancing with the Stars Award. You can see Rose Gottemuller, Mike McFall, Condi Rice, and Colin Call, and someone else who apparently can't decide whether she's dancing with Jonah or H.R. McMaster. Congratulations to you, Jonah. Next. Now, students know that they spend an awful lot of time obsessing about the title of their thesis. They're more worried about the title than the thesis itself. They agonize over titles. They ask the faculty frequently what to do about titles, and they spend an inordinate amount of time on their title. Now, this is, of course, understandable because the title, of course, is the catchphrase for their Stanford research capstone. And the title lives on forever in the Stanford Library. This student's title revealed a surprising and blossoming interest in weaponry. The title literally says AK-47s, tanks, and F-16s. And that title did not go unnoticed by others in the national security world. Sophia Boyer, we are pleased to present you with the Arms Dealer Association Award for the most weapons types used in a thesis title in Csec program history. So congratulations to you, Sophia. Our next award comes from, also comes from an association, the Draft Association. This student's deep interest in the all-volunteer force was all in. And as you all heard, she seized new quantitative methods, a feat that few Csec students have ever even attempted. And through it all, she matched a seriousness of purpose with a graciousness and sense of humor. So we are pleased to present the Draft Association Stripes Award to Elena Crespo for making the draft untenable in the future with her analysis. Congratulations to you, Elena. Now, most Csec students encounter research dead ends, and it's part of the learning process, and it's a key part of building resilience in all parts of your life, including in your intellectual life. But no student has ever gone down so many data rabbit holes as this one. In fact, students could write an honors thesis about her honors thesis starts and restarts and her resilience, incredible resilience through it all. So our Alice in Wonderland Award goes to Samantha Boyer for going down the most data rabbit holes in cyberspace. Congratulations to you, Samantha. Now, at the start of every year, we tell all of our honors students, it's okay not to know exactly what your topic is. We'll help you along the way. Just give it time and your thesis will come. This student took that advice to heart with uncommon gusto. Just give it time, your thesis will come. But he came on strong in the end, writing an ambitious thesis that tackled the politics of 3 countries in the Middle East, when most White Houses can usually only tackle 1. And though the official data still remains classified among students in the cohort, the awards committee believes that this student holds the record for writing the most number of usable thesis pages, emphasis on usable, the most number of usable thesis pages in a single 24-hour period. So our Wandering in the Desert Award goes to Brian Metzger for the longest search for a Middle Eastern thesis topic. Congratulations to you, Brian. Now, Andrew Loke is next. And it has, our next award for him has two components to it. So if Emily can put up the slide, we'll walk through this. We all know that Andrew has a passion for understanding foreign fighter repatriation. And apparently the committee has found that he's already influenced policy because President Trump has read his thesis and has even tweeted about it. And of course, everybody knows that everything on Twitter is 100% true. But Andrew has gone further than that because he also has his own theme song, John Denver's Take Me Home, Country Roads. You know you're going places when you've already made it on Twitter and you have a country song named after your thesis. So Andrew, we are very pleased to present you with the Take Me Home John Denver Foreign Fighter Gratitude Award for trying to get those foreign fighters repatriated in Europe. Congratulations to you, Andrew. Now, our final award recognizes a member of the class who has turned quarantine and remote learning into a facial hair engineering experiment that is worthy of DARPA and NIH support. So our Gillette Dual Use Award goes to Adam Elliott for path-breaking advances in beard engineering that I should add has kept us all very entertained as we've dealt with this very serious world and learning remotely online. So congratulations, Adam Elliott, and congratulations to everybody in the class of 2020. And that concludes our special awards to the class.
Thank you for the awards, Dr. Zegart. We now turn to the students, and for the next 10 minutes, we will be hearing from the students on their experience as part of the Csec Honors Program. First, I'd like to call on Sophia Boyer to offer her reflection.
Thank you so much, Esfandiar. I think the Csec Honors Program taught us a lot, but I think it culminated into the last 2 weeks in which a couple of our cohort members wrote the letter about being better advocates within Stanford for the Black Lives Matter movement and being better advocates for peace and stability in the US in general. And I couldn't be prouder to be associated with such an intelligent and motivated group of individuals. And it really shows how motivated we've all become through this program. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sophia, for the kind reflection. We now turn to Elena Crespo.
Thanks, Asfan. So going into the year, I was a little bit trepidatious because I think that a lot of times students of security just like it because it's sexy and it's interesting. They don't necessarily consider the human components of the work that they do. And also, I was really worried that they were all really cutthroat. But this year, I have been so reaffirmed by everyone's ability to think beyond the work that they're doing, to recognize the real human components, why we care about security. And I'm so proud to be a part of this cohort. And they're also not cutthroat. They're very supportive and very kind. So I have made friends in the Csec Honors cohort and people that inspire me to be a better person. So thank you all for that.
Thank you, Elena. Next is Kelly Devins.
Thank you, Esfandiar. So first, I'd just like to thank everyone who made this ceremony possible. Since we sadly can't be on campus together, you all put so much effort into making this a special experience for us, and we really appreciate that. So applying to the Csec Honors Program was the best decision I made at Stanford. I majored in engineering, as Dr. Ewing said earlier, but I have had an interest in this field for a while, and I really wanted to prove to myself that I could pursue this rigorous interdisciplinary academic experience of writing a thesis. The program was incredibly challenging and intimidating at times, but it was also my most fulfilling experience and greatest honor of these last 4 years. I've learned so much over the past 9 months, from our whirlwind time in Washington, D.C., to interviewing incredibly interesting and accomplished people who generously donated their time to me. And I can never thank my advisors, Professor Ewing and Ambassador Piper, and our teaching team, Professor Zegart and Dr. Muir, enough for their advice, support, and guidance. I'll always be grateful to have received this opportunity. Congratulations, everyone.
Thank you, Kelly. now turn to Samantha Peter.
Thank you, Dr. Mayer. I just wanted to say that CSAC, without a doubt, has been one of the most valuable experiences of my Stanford undergraduate career. I feel very privileged that I was given the opportunity to experience incredible mentorship, but also be surrounded by such passion from every single person of the cohort and all the professors I interacted with along the way. Whilst writing a thesis was absolutely the peak of the Stanford career, the CSAC program has given us so much more than that. It's given me skills, thoughts, perspectives that I will carry on forward past Stanford. And in an increasingly uncertain world, I really thank CSAC for giving me the skills to find clarity among complexity. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Jonah Martin Click Unterman.
Calm down. This has been the most tremendous experience. It has given me so much sense of confidence. I remember my freshman year, it was October, and Samantha and I were at a Jewish community, and she asked me if I was taking Poli-Sci 114S because it was required for the honors program. And I thought to myself, that's not really for me. I can never do an honors thesis. It was an idea that really scared me. And I have just been amazed watching everyone else grow. And it's been a tough year, and my advisors have been so important to me. And I just know that all of the late nights in the well or the library with all of my classmates have really paid off. And I'll see you on the dance floor.
Thank you, Jonah. We now turn to Andrew Loke.
The CSAC Honors Program has been the highlight of my Stanford education, and I am so thankful to my advisors, the CSAC teaching team, and the CSAC staff for making this unique opportunity possible. The rigors of this program have made me a sharper thinker, and a more meticulous scholar. I've learned how to craft a strong argument, how to ask a probing research question, and how to persevere through challenges. Your dedication to my learning shone through every day, and I'm so grateful. I'd also like to take a moment this morning to thank all of my peers in the cohort as well. Writing a senior honors thesis is an inherently isolating enterprise, especially when you're social distancing and working from home. Having a community of students to share tips, feedback, and jokes made this process much smoother and a lot more fun. Even when I felt like I was breaking records for the most cumulative hours spent by a single student in Green Library, I never felt like I was alone. You were always there to offer a fresh perspective on my work, to lighten the mood, to offer encouragement and commiseration. Thank you for being an integral part of my senior year, and I'm so glad that CSAC brought us together.
Thank you, Andrew. We now turn to Brian Metzger.
Thanks, Dr. Meir. So I guess unlike Jonah, but like Sam, I knew that I wanted to do the CSAC honors program fairly early on. I think it might have been sophomore year for me. And I think it was something that I sort of just made a decision about based on kind of where I was academically. I knew that, you know, I was an IR major, I was focusing on international security. It just sort of like made sense in that way as something to finish off my Stanford career with. But I think, you know, in addition to how challenging this year has been and how much it's forced me to grow both, I think, academically and in terms of what I want to do career-wise and what my own relationship to the field of international security is, I think it's been amazing to have like this sense of community that we really have in this cohort. And I think that's something that really distinguishes CSAC from a lot of the other honors thesis programs that exist at Stanford. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories from my other friends who are in other programs writing theses and how they spent long hours kind of wasting away on their own, writing these theses, not really having any sense of camaraderie or solidarity in that process. And I think that's something I've always been grateful for about CSAC is having this thesis program actually become sort of a feature of my social life at Stanford. And for that to be something that can remain constant even as we all moved online. And so I think that's something that I'll always highlight about my time as being part of this cohort, whether that's someone just asking me how it was, or whether that's a student a few years younger than me who might be wondering whether or not they should do the program. So thank you all very much for that.
Thank you, Brian. And last but not the least, as part of the reflection section, Antigone Xenopoulos.
So echoing Kelly, I'd like to thank everyone from Csec for putting so much effort into organizing our online presentations, the gifts we received, this little ornament, our graduation here. I really appreciate it, and I think it means a lot to us, especially given that our what should have been didn't end up happening. I also want to thank Csec for cultivating such an interdisciplinary intellectual environment. I think it's really unique to Stanford and unique to Csec that you find students from more than a handful of majors covering a really broad array of topics. So and then Dr. Ewing, Dr. Meir, and Dr. Zegart have been some of the most supportive, approachable, and thoughtful faculty I've encountered throughout my time at Stanford. So really thank you for giving us your time and for being invested in each and every one of us and our projects. And then finally, to my cohort, I'd like to say thank you to all of you. It's been so much fun. I mean, it's been a pleasure to work alongside you, but it's really been a fun and funny time. And thank you for being so candid and for the friendship that you've brought to me. This has been one of the most tight-knit academic communities I've had the pleasure of studying with at Stanford, so I'm really grateful. And I remember Dr. Zegart saying at the info session last year that when people come back to their Stanford reunions, they go to two places, their freshman dorm and their Csec reunion. At the beginning, I was a little skeptical, like what is an honors thesis reunion? But she's absolutely right. And I look forward to seeing you all at our graduation and at all the reunions thereafter. So thank you for accompanying me on what's been the highlight of my career at Stanford.
Thank you so much for these wonderful reflections. Really a highlight of today's ceremony. We now turn to Dr. Amy Zegart for closing remarks of the ceremony.
Thanks, Dr. Meir. I think you can all now see why we're so lucky to be able to teach this Csec Honors seminar. What a joy it's been to work with these students for this past year. So I want to end our ceremony with a few words just for our students. This is for you. So like all of us at Csec, you are a special and a strange group of people because you like to think about scary things, whether it's coercion or war or terrorism or biothreats or cybersecurity, just to name a few. And we know that there are scary things much closer to home right now, a pandemic and racial injustice. So as you go into the world, I hope that you'll remember that the most important thing you need in this scary world isn't anything you learned in writing your thesis. It's nothing you learned in our seminar, and it's nothing you learned in a Stanford classroom. I'm sorry, parents, you had to pay that big tuition bill. But the most important thing that you need for the world is optimism. You need to choose optimism, use optimism, and embrace it, and amazing things can happen. And we have an incredible role model about the transformative power of optimism by one man, one person here in our Csec community. And his name is Bill Peary, right? You all know that in 1962, Bill Peary was a young engineer when he was called suddenly to the White House to look at top secret photographs that turned out to be Soviet nuclear missile installations during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And Bill recounts how he worried that he might not live to see the next sunrise. And we know that President Kennedy felt that there was a significant chance that there would be global nuclear war and the world might end. But in that moment in 1962, Bill Peary chose optimism, and he decided to devote the rest of his life to reducing nuclear risks, including teaching all of you and generations of students at Stanford. In the 1990s, when the Cold War ended, Bill Peary was one of the leaders to denuclearize 3 countries that were former Soviet republics. And he went to Ukraine at one point, and he joined with his former counterparts, defense officials from the former Soviet Union and Ukraine, in a special ceremony where they planted sunflowers in one of the nuclear sites where there had been a Soviet SS-19 nuclear missile pointing directly at the United States. Every time I see a sunflower, I think of Bill Peary. And I think about the power of the optimism of one person and what that one person can do in the world. And I hope you'll think about Bill Peary when you see sunflowers too. So on behalf of everybody here at Csec, let me join in congratulating you, class of 2020, and to remind you that we look forward to doing this all over again in person, back here at the farm at some point in the future. Congratulations to you all. And that concludes our ceremony for today.